Thank you for joining us for Permanent Record Series number 2, Legal Holds and Frozen Records. This is a records management seminar delivered by the United States National Archives and Records Administration's National Records Management Training Program. In this session, Michael Baimbridge and Jack Kabrel will discuss legal holds and frozen records. Now, let's join the seminar.
Right now, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Jeff Benson, who will get us started.
Okay, thank you, Paulette. Our two presenters, Jack Kabrel and Michael Baimbridge. You know, I was reading through the biographical information. I know both Jack and Michael for a long time. You know, I can refer to Jack as being Mr. New Jersey, and I could probably refer to Michael as being Mr. Texas. Yeehaw! There you go. I knew I could do that. Having said that, I'm now going to check to see if the people are logging out. No, you guys are staying on board. That's great. Yeah, so Jack has spent a lot of time working in New Jersey as well as with NARA. Basically, Jack has been doing this archival gig for quite a few years, starting off as a processing archivist for congressional papers, moved on to a large municipality in New Jersey, basically building from a program from the ground up, which is not an easy thing to do. I can personally vouch for that. And eventually he moved to Massachusetts, where they talk funny, and he's working now with the National Archives and Records Administration in the Permanent Records Capture team. Actually, both Jack and Michael are on that Permanent Records Capture team, hence the name Permanent Records Issues and the series itself. So that's Jack. Michael, again, Mr. Texas, has been working with NARA about the same amount of time I have, which is about 13 years. Prior to that, if you looked at a list of places he's been, I could spend an hour going through them. He has been Houston Airport System, University of Texas Medical Branch. The point of all this, though, is that both Jack and Michael have been practitioners in records management for quite a few years. They have a lot of good guidance that they can give us, including today's topic on the impact of legal holds on and frozen records as they pertain to permanent records. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael Baimbridge.
Thanks, Jeff. Welcome, everybody. I'll give you a little background. The National Archives is an independent agency under the executive branch of government responsible for the protection and preservation of historical documents. We're the agency that protects and preserves the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Charters of Freedom, all the good stuff when it comes to the nation's history. And as Jeff said, I'll be your primary briefer today. I do interactive training and interactive briefings. When we ask a question, it's not rhetorical. I'm going to expect an answer, and I probably will not move forward until I have at least a quorum. 50% or more have to respond, otherwise we're just going to have some dead space. I hope you can appreciate that, but I know we're doing a briefing after lunch and things can be hard. So the Permanent Records Capture team is a section that came together after the National Archives had a transformation, and it's our responsibility for assisting federal entities in bringing their permanent records into the National Archives. So the Permanent Records Capture team is in place so that we can help federal agencies bring their permanent records into the National Archives. But we found that there are some issues surrounding permanent records, and so we're putting on a series of permanent record issues briefings. And we invite you to attend them all or go back and view them on YouTube. So why are we here? My very first interactive question to you, and I expect answers, please tell me, are you a taxpayer? Yes or no? And don't worry, nobody else can see your answers, just for me. And don't worry, I'm not going to report you to the IRS if you say no. Okay, so we have a majority here that say they're taxpayers. I haven't really identified anybody that said no. Okay, that's good. How many of you here, your agency receives taxpayer monies in order to do your operations? Okay, so we have a majority. Well, why are we here? Frozen records and legal holds cost us both time and money. There are benefits to your agency for the holds. They keep the records in-house. You can track the records, making sure that the correct records are available. But we find that there are a lot of frozen records in federal record centers. How many of you store records either in a commercial record center or a federal record center? Yes, I store records in a commercial record center, or yes, in a federal record center. Okay, so In a federal, and I'm going to define the terms for you in a couple of slides, in a federal record center, if your records have a legal hold, we call them frozen records. The disposition has temporarily been suspended. If it's back in your agency or at a commercial facility, you're going to call them on legal hold. You've got a hold. They can't be disposed of because you have ongoing litigation. Time, money. Currently, within the National Archives Federal Records System, there are 17,971,133 boxes that are in a frozen status. And again, I'm going to define what frozen is for you in a moment, but know that this is one of the main reasons we're here, frozen records. So a federal record center costs you to store a box 23 cents per month, per box. So that $17.9 million costs us as taxpayers and as agencies approximately $4,133,000 per month, or $49,600,000 in change per year. In normal National Archives records management training, we talk about 3 to 5% of records having a permanent status. So permanent means at some point in time that federal entity has the legal requirement to turn over both physical and legal custody to the National Archives of those permanent records so that we can do the preservation, the ongoing migration, the protection, the access to the general public of those records. So for this next statistic, let's assume an average of 4% of these boxes being permanent. So approximately $718,000, costing us as taxpayers and as agencies, again, approximately $165,000 per month, or $1,984,000 in change per year. But just as important to the National Archives is the fact that permanent records, while they can be transferred and brought into the National Archives, they can't be processed. So let's move on. I know we only have an hour. Keywords you should know. How is a freeze different than a litigation hold? Litigation refers to any legal action involving your agency. Because of ongoing litigation, your agency through the General Counsel's office may periodically issue litigation holds, temporarily suspending that disposal. It comes because of a lawsuit. We also have partial lifts on freezes. So when we look at a freeze, that's where your agency originally states that an entire transfer to a federal record center or an accession into the archives is on hold. Go back and declare that a specific series within that transfer or a date time frame can be lifted. So we can have a complete lifting of a hold, or we can have a partial lifting of a hold, a complete lifting of a freeze, or a partial lifting of a freeze. The holds, simply the implementation of a litigation hold issued by your agency, again, through your General Counsel's office. When received, the records officer should suspend the normal disposition cycle of records mentioned. Pretty simple. Frozen records. Records whose scheduled disposition has been temporarily suspended by the National Archives because of special circumstances that alter the administrative, legal, or fiscal value. So the terms that we use at NARA are frozen and freeze. When the records are at your agency or commercial entity, not inside the National Archives sphere of influence, they're on holds. Same thing, just different terminology. Show of hands, real quick. How many of you currently know that you have a freeze or a freeze has recently been lifted at or by your agency? Okay, freezes. Don't know. Okay, we'll give you some ideas on how to go about finding if you have a freeze or not. So let me go back real quick. Thank you for being interactive. Other words under the frozen category, multiple freezes. It's when an agency has records in a federal record center that are impacted by multiple litigation holds. Has everybody heard of Kabrel litigation, the tobacco litigation, DuPont, Hurricane Katrina? So multiple freezes. You could be impacted based upon who you are and what you do by multiple freezes. And then there's another term called a Z-freeze. That's when the National Archives actually imposes a hold on all forms of disposition, including transferring them to a record center or to the National Archives because of an appraisal issue. It's not a litigation issue, but there's going to be a change in the retention period. Either we're going to decrease the retention period or we're going to increase or elevate the value of it. Okay. If you would please, in the chat box, type in what freeze your agency has been involved in. EPA moratorium, okay, that's a good one. Anybody else want to get tobacco? That's TIL tobacco. Tribal records, okay. Deep Horizon, yeah, we got a variety of them out there. So we can have multiples. Now, the thing that I want you to understand is prior to being able to legally dispose of the temporary records, either through a hold or through a freeze, you have to lift it on all the different freezes that may apply. But just because, let's say the example that we used was Kabrel litigation and tobacco, just because I write a document, and we have some samples that we'll cover a little bit later on that are actually in your package, just because I write a letter that lifts the freeze for Kabrel litigation, as long as I'm under another freeze or internal hold, I cannot legally dispose of those records. The only way that I can either dispose of the records or fully transfer them to the National Archives is by lifting all of the frozen hold status. So how are records frozen? There's a variety of ways. And again, remember, frozen means that they're not eligible for destruction. The first way is your agency requests a change in the retention period for the records. I get an update. I need to change the total retention period for this series or body of records. Or number two, the agency notifies a particular federal record center that records are needed for up to 1 year beyond the date they're eligible for their normal disposal. Number three, the National Archives approves an agency's written request to extend the retention period for a series or system, electronic system. And then number four, you might have this kind of blanket freeze that applies. That's the multiple different litigation actions that are out there. The point we're trying to make here, and that we really want to stress, is that a freeze or freezes can be applied at a variety of record levels. Specific to federal record centers, that's where the freeze occurs. It can be across several different record series, it can be a specific records transfer, or they can be records by a certain type or by a certain record group. And record group is referring to your agency. Each federal agency has its own records group. So a hold scenario. We're going to read through this, and we're going to ask you to respond in the chat what you think should occur. Bob Jones, whose supervisor just left for 6 months paternity leave, was told to send 40 cubic feet of permanent records to a federal record center immediately. As a part of his normal business process, Bob checks with his program manager, his Freedom of Information Act officer, and general counsel. The agency's general counsel said that the records can't be transferred to the Federal Record Center because of a legal hold. Bob is torn between doing what his supervisor told him and listening to general counsel. What should Bob do? Okay, so let's try and consider a couple of things here. The supervisor wants the low activity records to be sent off site to save on space and money. So maybe Bob should be asking general counsel 2 questions. Is it impending litigation or active litigation? If so, keep them in-house, easier to reference. If it's ongoing but low activity, if general counsel approves, he can send it to a Federal Record Center for storage. Federal Record Centers will accept litigation hold records once they come into our custody, or if we already have them, because we're just the housekeepers with physical custody of the records at that point in time. We will, through you, impose a freeze on the retention period so that we don't dispose of them. So sending low-activity records to the FRC is probably his best bet. But then again, you always defer and comply, correct, with general counsel. But it may be that general counsel was not aware that federal record centers could hold those records. And you can still call them back. So we'd kind of like to see maybe Bob build a case for transferring the records. Okay, so steps to inform the National Archives of an agency's legal hold and request to freeze. Now, we shortened it down for the briefing, and we have an actual link that Jack is citing. The slide notes were sent and a link in the log on information. There's an FAQ that goes step by step by step by step. There's like 10 steps. But we kind of narrowed it down for you. Number one, agency notifies the National Archives of a legal hold, requests a freeze on its records, and then sends a letter to the director of NARA's Federal Records Center. That director reviews and forwards the agency request to the FRC Transfer and Disposition Coordinator. Then doing some internal procedures, the NARA folks implement it, make sure that the changes are updated in the ARCIS database. In the chat box, what benefits can you receive for an agency signing a transfer request in the Electronic Records Archives and transferring the permanent records into the National Archives? They've been sitting on the shelf in the Federal Records Center. What benefits can you see of transferring them? Yeah, money, huge money savings to the agency, saving space. Save space for the agency, save space for the National Archives. And once it's transferred to the National Archives, it's off your books and it's on the National Archives books. Plus, we can start part of the preservation process. One of the problems that we have, though, is we cannot start processing those records for public access. Do you remember the numbers I kind of threw out at you earlier? The 17, almost 18 million boxes that are currently being held because of their frozen status. In the feedback box, how many of you think that all of those records are still under a litigation hold? As opposed to, I didn't know what to do to take them out of their frozen status. Do a little feedback. Answer with a yes or no. Yes, I think all those freezes are applicable to all 18 million boxes, or no, probably not. There's probably a certain percentage that could have been exactly out of sight, out of mind. But the thing is, you can go to general counsel and your agency records officer, and you can potentially help thaw these frozen records, get them ready for disposal or for actual transfer to where they can be processed into the National Archives. Nothing upsets me more than wasting taxpayer dollars. And just because you don't know how to do something doesn't mean you should just let it sit. That's why we're here as the Permanent Records Capture Team, to help you identify these frozen records, to help you through the process. Maybe you need some assistance in writing up the document correctly, or how do I approach my general counsel and speak to them. We're here to help you out on that. Free up those taxpayer dollars and free up that space, helping us help you. So here's our second scenario. Kathleen has 200 cubic feet of permanent records at a Federal Records Center. These records are ready for accessioning by the National Archives. That means turning over physical and legal custody to NARA. However, the records have a freeze attached to them. She wants to reduce budget costs. She wants to transfer them, but she's not sure because they're frozen. Is she allowed to transfer these records? What can she do? Willie says no, Charles says no, Carolyn says no. It's kind of situationally dependent. In the grander scheme of things, in the eyes of the National Archives, yes, she can. Your agency may say no. You always defer to your general counsel, but in the eyes of the National Archives, yes, she can. The problem that we have at the National Archives, and again, why we're having this whole series put together, are the different issues that impact us on our end. Getting the information of your agency processed into the National Archives and available where appropriate for people to access and consume. Yes, the records stay at the national. Once the records come into the National Archives, it's until we no longer exist as a nation. They stay with us forever, till the end. Well, and you say, oh, joy, but the thing is, the reason that we do this, we do protection, we do preservation. We do it better than anybody else when it comes to records. However, we cannot process and do the complete, I want to say, preservation, access, that kind of thing, until we have the freezes lifted. So what we want Kathleen, to do in this situation, yes, we want her to go ahead and transfer them, get them started into the preservation process, but we want to encourage her to pursue her general counsel in lifting the freeze. Because the quicker we get the freeze lifted, the quicker we can actually start the processing and the access. Everybody here's heard of open government? Yes. Of course, there's certain collections, certain bodies of records that are, national security or personally identifiable information. We had a different series, number 1, issues when it comes to access restriction. We're still going to protect and preserve those and make them available only to the people who need to have them. But for the rest of the materials, it's just simply they're frozen. We want to lift that freeze. So Kathy can and I, as the National Archives, but again, we want you to work with General Counsel. Yes, even FOIA considerations. We honor FOIA exemptions. We need to know about them coming in, and I'm going to direct you back to our other briefing on YouTube, and we may be holding that series again on access restrictions, but for FOIA, yes, we honor FOIA considerations. So examples of past or current freezes, and y'all have already listed a lot of them, but some of the big ones that we see being across the board, tobacco litigation freeze, and they're revisiting that right now, Department of Justice is, DuPont, asbestos, Kabrel, and Katrina. These are some that you may want to take your presentation, make a copy of it, go to your general counsel and say, okay, these are the blanket freezes that we know about. Are we able to lift any of these? Do we have any internal holds on records? We want to make sure that, the records are as readily available as possible when we send them off. So steps for lifting a freeze. And again, we do have an FAQ that you have the link to, or Jack will pop in the link. The agency general counsel and agency records officer should send a freeze lift request letter or email to David Weinberg. He's the director of the Federal Records Center program, and you're going to include the following information. What was the name of the freeze? It was Hurricane Katrina. Justification for lifting the freeze. We went through and we visually verified that these record series were not a part of, nor will they ever be a part of, litigation. What's our agency record group number? Here's the actual accession, which means when we send it over to the archive side of the house, or here's the Federal Records Center transfer number. Give a full series number, description, disposition statement from your records control schedule or the general schedule. And then a statement of the current location, specify what Federal Records Center they're located in or which archives, because we also run regional archives and regional record centers throughout the U.S. So in the chat box, can we identify some of the benefits of lifting a freeze? The costs are the same. It doesn't matter if the box is frozen or not. The cost is the same. And as Nancy says, yes, send the cost of all that storage to the National Archives. If they're permanent records, transfer them to the National Archives. Then the cost is on NARA's books. But we want you to make sure that you lift those freezes so that we can start processing them. All really, really good responses. And again, thanks for being interactive. Less records, less cost, yes. So our last scenario, Matt is the agency records officer. He wants to make a direct offer to the National Archives of 300 cubic feet of permanent records. So the first time we've seen the term direct offer, it means that the records are still in Matt's physical and legal control. They're at his office. He wants to offer 300 cubic feet. They're not in the Federal Records Center. They're back at his office. So the records have been under a hold for 30 years and have been physically located at the agency. Can Matt do this? Now, does the National Archives really want him to do this? It's a yes and no. Yes, we really want those records because at some point in time, we agreed with your agency and said, yes, these are records that we think have permanent value. But no, we prefer not to have them until you've lifted that litigation hold. But we're going to take them. We can't process them. And so then it's, again, back to that out of sight, out of mind. I mean, hopefully you like us. You like our free briefing, you signed up, but do you really want us hounding you day and night? Hey, lift this freeze. Hey, lift this freeze. Hey, lift this freeze. No, we should get this done. Hey, lift this hold, lift this hold. We want you to go into the Electronic Records Archives, fill out the transfer request. If they're still needed for litigation, go ahead and hold them back. Maybe there's a small component of this 300 cubic feet. We do accept and sign direct offers of permanent records, but we would rather have Matt pursue the lifting of this litigation hold. Okay, so best practices. You know your records better than anybody else, or you should. And you should also know your records control schedule. You should know which records are temporary and which ones are permanent. Know which are affected by the litigation hold and disposition freezes. With some extra effort, we could probably pull the documents back when you initiated a freeze, meaning it was litigation hold at your agency, you sent it to the Record Center, you imposed the freeze, not the National Archives, okay? Know which records are impacted, which ones you can then go back to your general counsel and say, you know, do we still have this litigation occurring? Stay on top of your records so that you know what's currently in place and what has been lifted. Again, stay in touch with general counsel. If general counsel is not going to be using these records actively for many months, consider sending them to the Federal Record Center to free up office space. I guarantee you, if you're in the numbers where you are, it's more costly than 23 cents per box per month to store them at your agency. It's really cheap to store them in a Federal Record Center. But be sure that you prepare a detailed box list. And you have to do a folder-level index box list for all your permanent records. And again, you can always call these records back when litigation preparation starts going. Permanent records also may have better storage conditions and security if you store them in a Federal Record Center until they're actually needed for litigation preparation. So, Jolynn, did we send you a check or something in the mail? Because you're bringing up our next topical area. We're going to be having a briefing coming up. We haven't posted it yet on how to do a good detailed box list. That's going to be issue number 3, permanent records. Box lists and how to build a good one. Correct, Heather, Form 135, Standard Form 135, you can do a listing on there, but we've got a little bit more detail to give you, okay? But let's keep going. Best practices continue. Create good box lists with detailed descriptions of the records so that we can find the records you need when you need them for litigation. And also, you should have an internal policy or process to lift a freeze. Including the policy, you should have standard operating procedures that link to consultations with general counsel. Now, again, only I can see your response. How many of you have an annual purge or records clean-out day? Yes, I have one, or no, I don't. Interactive portion. And does everybody kind of remember the definition of records management? It's the controlling, planning, maintenance, use, training, awareness, audit of the records in the program. Okay, this is almost kind of like an audit process as well. You're auditing your records to see if there are any new litigation holes or old holes. Do you currently receive notifications from general counsel or your agency records officer when you have litigation holes? Yes or no? Okay, some do and some don't. I want to make it a part of my annual process that when I'm gearing up for that clean out, that I'm, in touch with general counsel. That's going to be my yearly meeting with them. Please inform me of all current litigation holds that are impacting my records here at the agency or in our commercial entity, and any freezes that I may have at a Federal Record Center. You want to have a separate list. And then you want to start, is there anything that we can start working on now that we can lift? Have we finished litigation? No more litigation occurring? Can we lift this freeze or can we lift this hold? Okay. So at this point, if you liked the backgrounds today and the little stick man characters, the little snow people, we blame Jack Kabrel for that. I warned him that his face was going to freeze like that. Prior to opening up for questions and answers, in your handout section, you had some examples of freeze documentations. I'm going to turn it over to Jack and have Jack talk you through those real quick.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to take over your screen very briefly, so you may not be able to actually use your screen, but it's only going to be briefly because the only thing that I really wanted to follow up on was when Michael was giving a list of ways to basically lift a freeze, right, that he had spoken about earlier. I'm just going to share with you some of the handouts that we had sent to you. And the first one will be, this is an example of a freeze letter that that an agency wants to basically, when they want to lift that freeze, they'll include different things in there, like they'll have maybe an attachment with a lot of the DAUs, that would be included in that lifting of the freeze. And here it says this is a written confirmation of recent changes that they've had, and we're requesting to freeze disposition on certain series. And it says, I believe that the agency may be one of only ones remaining, so please accept this as an official request to lift the freeze hold requested by the agency. So this is an official request by an agency to lift the freeze, and this would be the National Archives' response to it. And they're saying the attached letter, and this would be, has been asked to lift the freeze, do a global update to NARA 5, which at the time in 2004 was where we held everything. It was basically our ARCUS, right, that we deal with now, where we would control everything and have all of the data. So basically that's what would happen if we would go into our databases and make the changes. And another example of it here, of another agency that asks for something similar, and here the second letter would be the letter that was attached to NARA, and this would be the request to Mr. Weinberg, Records and Declassification, requesting that NARA lift the freeze for the identified accessions which were attached to this. And again, the first one would be NARA's response, the attached letter. All FRCs should check ARCUS and verify that the freeze lift has been implemented correctly. So in the first one, it was an older one that referenced NARS 5, and this one referenced ARCUS, basically our databases and putting into place a lifting of the freeze. So that's all. I just wanted to show you that, and you might want to use that as an example when you're thinking about writing these letters.
Okay,
Michael.
So now you have no excuse whatsoever. You have examples, you have better understanding, you have statistics, and we're going to be making this available to you. You can go back and go through the process. You need to go back and go through the process to lift the frozen status on your temporary and permanent records, especially the permanent records from the perspective of the National Archives, so that we can start processing the records. Okay, once the freeze is over and lifted, does the disposition start where it left off or start all over again? That's a really good question. If it is already past the retention period and it should have been disposed of, then it will go through its normal disposal or transfer processing request, unless the courts have said you have to keep them for X amount of years. Hey, wouldn't the agency records officer be going to each office to check on costs? One would think that agency records officers would, but most federal entities are like us. This is an extra duty as assigned. So they may not have time and they may not have resources to do it. But obviously, we've piqued your interest to a certain degree, so we want you to go back and do it. Okay, permanent records, all one word, at NARA.gov. If you have specific questions as to your agency and freezes, and I have an issue, somebody didn't come through on your side, somebody dropped the ball on my side, that kind of thing, if you can send us an email to permanentrecords@NARA.gov, or to me, michael.baimbridge@nara.gov or jack.kabrel@nara.gov. We will follow up.
Hi, this is Tommy from the Air Force Records Office. I presume the same remarks also apply to permanent electronic records that are frozen?
Yeah. We will accept the permanent electronic, however, we cannot start processing them until the freeze or hold has been lifted.
Looks like Jolynn had a question about an example of a good descriptive log sheet.
Okay, what is a log sheet?
Or a detailed box list.
For destruction, log sheet.
Detailed box list example will be coming up when that training comes up or that briefing comes up later on in the summer. I mean, we're still working out some of the smaller details. Actually, what we do here for our briefings with the Permanent Records Capture team, we partner with a bunch of folks inside the National Archives. Obviously, we're partnering with our training folks. We really appreciate them. Thanks, Paulette. Thanks, Jeff. But we partner with the archive side, too. And so we're coming up with the issues that are there, and then we go back to the archivist. Okay, what do you want to see on a box list? What are minimum requirements? And then if there's extra stuff, do you have extra stuff, data elements that want to be added to it? And then we build our briefings around that. So we're still in the process of finalizing the requirements. Okay, non-permanent records long past the destruction date from Heather. If the local general counsel agrees that tobacco litigation does not apply, may we recall from the FRC and in-house destroy? If tobacco litigation is the only freeze and only hold on those temporary records, yes, you can.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Michael and Jack, you did a wonderful job. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was amazing. And I'd like to thank everyone out there who attended. Thank you to all of you who attended today. We really appreciate you spending time and joining us for this. This is something that we are going to continue to do. And they're completely free, so let other people know about them. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact me.
And if there's something you're missing, you didn't get your question asked, you don't have the link to the FAQ, please go ahead and email permanentrecords@nara.gov or Paulette or Jack or myself, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered and your needs fulfilled to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this seminar useful. For more information about the U.S. National Records Management Training Program, please visit www.archives.gov. Also, our current workshop schedule for both face-to-face and web-based training is available online at nara.learn.com.